Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. This week, back for another episode as we go back to 1991 and we live in Hysteria. But before we get there, Chris, how are you, my man?
Very good, very good. I just had a very delicious bagel with a nice scrambled egg and some melted cheddar cheese and a little bit of cream cheese. So my day
welcome back to
off,
the cooking exchange.
Yeah, my day started off well. I got my cup of coffee and I'm ready to talk about early 90s German power metal, as if I wouldn't have been ready any other time.
Exactly. Right in your wheelhouse, I know. But a band that I don't think you might have had much familiarity with before this. But before we get there, a lot of new stuff came out this week. Did you have a chance to check any of it out?
Lots of it. It just started out like singles galore, and then they just kept coming. This one was a little bittersweet for me because it was Brothers of Metal, who just recently announced that they could not attend Prague Power this year, but they released a new single called The Other Son of Odin. Ailstorm released a new single called Magellan's Expedition, which is pretty much what you would expect from Ailstorm. I don't know that I'm going to sit here and name all of these because we'll be here all day, but I'll just name a couple more. Serenity released a new single called In the Name of Scotland, which, I love anything that they do. And Jani Limatainen released his second single from his upcoming My Father's Son album, and this song is Into the Fray, and it has Timo Kotipelto on guest vocals, so, I mean, it's, basically a Kane's Offering song, but
awesome.
Definitely worth listening to. And also, Seven Kingdoms just dropped a new single, I believe yesterday, called Universal Terrestrial. That one I haven't had a chance to listen to yet, but that's coming from their upcoming album, Zenith. And I have to say, I was really impressed with them the last time I saw them live. I think that they're really, an up-and-coming U.S. power metal band. Funny that we would just... spend a week talking about Judicator, another U.S. power metal band. And I guess while we're in that area, I'll mention Lords of the Trident have a new album called The Offering, which I just grabbed yesterday, and I am really looking forward to listening. I only have a couple of their songs from like random prog power samplers through the years, but they're I think it's their singer is the he's kind of the brains behind the what is it, the power that festival in Wisconsin, the Mad with Power Fest.
Yes, I think they're always on the lineup as a result, right? They usually play that
right
because of the time.
So I saw a couple mutual friends really praising the new album, so I decided to just blindly buy it on iTunes, and I'll probably give it a listen this week, but yeah, that's what came through. Have you had a chance to listen to? I saw a new Creator single came through.
Yeah, they are so consistently good. This was, I think it's funny. They, as someone sent me in a group chat the other day, they've been writing the same song for 40 years. And they should never change because, they're just so good, at what they do. I'm really looking forward to the album. The single was very, very good. It's funny. I did not have a chance to listen to most of the items that you had mentioned for whatever reason. It was just a little bit of a hectic week, on the home front. But a lot. It seems like a lot of bands are kind of putting out stuff for gearing up for either spring or early summer releases. So it should make for a very, very fun couple of months.
Yeah, Civil War dropped a new single too. I mean, I guess I ended up naming everything anyway. But yeah, they have a new they have a new single called Invaders, and I've been a big fan of them, especially the last couple of albums. That they were a couple of the members of Sabaton when Sabaton had that big split a few years back. A couple of the members that left started Civil War, and I was a big fan of. When I'm going to forget his name, was the vocalist. I was really disappointed to find out that he had left the band. I'm looking it up right now so I don't do it any injustice. Nils Patrick Johansson. His vocals are so unique, and I think I first was made aware of him from his work with Wuthering Heights, but he also had a solo album a few years ago and was singer for Astral Doors. Just nobody sounds like him. It's such a unique style, and I thought he was such a good fit with Civil War. But their new singer, I think, is kind of in that vein, and Kelly Sundown Carpenter. And I think that he fits the sound really well as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing the new stuff. So yeah,
I loved his vocals.
I just named everyone.
I actually loved Kelly Carpenter's vocals on the one Beyond Twilight album that he was on. He was a really, really nice guy and a very, very unique vocalist. Really, I guess his the way he sings is kind of very intense but very melodic yet at the same time. So I'll be checking that out as well. I was not the biggest fan of the first couple of Civil War albums, but I'm going to give this one a shot just the same.
Yeah, I think it was whatever their last one was that they did with Nils. I think it was the last full measure, and it had songs like Tombstone, and I thought that was really great. I enjoyed that a lot. There was a lot of fun songs on there, and that was really good. That's why I was disappointed to hear that he had left the band after they released such a strong album, and that was their last full-length release, and that came out 6 years ago, so they're definitely due.
I totally hear you. And another band that's been due for quite some time is Heaven's Gate, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I chose this. Believe it or not, this album actually was released 31 years ago last week, so it's actually a little bit timely in that sense, a little bit of an anniversary, like I said. What's crazy to me, though, is this was a band that, like, for me, I remember buying this album used at Mr. Cheapo's. I went into the store. It would be like my monthly pilgrimage to the store. They had stacks and stacks of used CDs, and for whatever reason, the cover kind of caught my eye with the dragon smoking a pipe on the front. I don't know. There was something about the cover art and the font, to be honest with you, that just had me curious. And I had a feeling it was going to sound like German power metal. And this was obviously the days before you could just pull out your cell phone and just Google to find out what what a band was all about. So this was a complete blind purchase for me, but it was an album that I played for quite a while. Something about them, though, when I bought the disc, I remember enjoying it, and I played it straight through a number of times. But going back to like that first listen, which has got to be for me well over 20 years ago now, it was the first track, the title track, that was kind of the hook for me. And then the rest of the disc was kind of there. But I actually had a very different experience this time because a lot of the other tracks are much stronger than I remembered them being back in the day. But before we dive deep into the album itself, was this like your first full exposure to the band? I don't think you would. I know you never heard the album before.
I'd never really listened to like a full Heaven's Gate album. I've heard songs here and there, and I was like aware of them, and I was aware that they were this German power metal band that kind of faded out before the turn of the century. And I think the very first song I probably heard by them was their cover of Halloween's A Little Time, which was on the Keepers of Jericho tribute album that came out in 2000. And that might have been one of the last studio offerings the band ever put out, because their last full-length album had come out in 1999. So yeah, this was really kind of like the first time listening to an album kind of start to finish. This was, I guess, their second full-length album. I guess there was an EP in between this and their debut album In Control, which came out in 1989. But yeah, I ended up enjoying this a lot. And it wasn't like one of those slow builders for me. Like, I liked it right away.
It's surprisingly catchy, and I think accessible. It's something that you can kind of just immediately listen to, and it's not that there's a ton to digest here, so I think that definitely helps. Even though the band really, I guess, is credited with coming together in, I guess, 1989 or something like that, a number of the guys, specifically Thorsten Muller, the drummer, and I think the singer Thomas Recke, who I'll talk about a little bit more later on, the two of them were actually in a band called Steel Tower, and they started back in the early in the early 80s. And then ultimately, after I think putting out an album or two under that moniker, they then switched to Heaven's Gate back in 89. I think the name change was a couple of years before that, but for whatever reason, I don't know why, they kind of retooled their sound, retooled the image, changed the name of the band, and then they were off and running. But it's, if you think about it, when they were hitting their stride, if you will, in 1989, this was like right at the heyday of German power metal with like those early Halloween albums, and Blind Guardian was, doing their thing or whatever. So these guys were really their contemporaries, but unlike those other bands, they never made it like at all. I mean, yeah, they would obviously come, and stay around for another 10 years or so, but they never achieved the same notoriety as some of these other bands. And I guess the question I have is why? Certainly a little bit different, maybe not as good in certain respects. But this is a really solid album, and I'm a little surprised that, they never really kind of gained more traction, especially as the genre kind of ballooned in the mid to late 90s with like Stratovarius and Angra and all these other bands that were putting out like magnificent releases.
And another interesting thing too is that everyone in the band at the time this album was released, with the exception of one guy, didn't do anything after the 90s. Like, I'm not saying they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything in metal. So the one outlier being Sasha Paeth, who, is like the uber producer and guitarist for Avantasia, and Miro makes an appearance on this album, playing piano on the Best Days of My Life, which is the ballad of the album. And he's now, I believe, a touring member with Avantasia, and I think has been on their last handful of albums. So there's a little bit of that Avantasia connection, but the rest of the band just kind of disappeared. And the one that really surprised me was Thomas Retke, the vocalist, because his vocals are awesome. And the only thing I could think of that to answer your question is maybe this band just, had they started maybe like, I don't know, a couple years earlier, but I mean, they're only 3-4 years later than Halloween. So I don't know, maybe there was just a glut of power metal at that time, but I feel like this would have been really, I think this would have been really palatable to the hard rock, heavy metal, like hair metal 80s radio sound that was going on a few years prior. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but I guess not every band can be Stratovarius and Blind Guardian and Angra,
Yeah, it's funny. Thomas Retke is interesting. Because when I first heard the album, and it certainly didn't change my opinion this week, I love his vocals, and he's kind of an understated guy insofar as he sounds great, but he did a lot of session work with a ton of bands, but he doesn't really get the credit or the name recognition that a lot of his peers did. Just by way of, just reference, he did backing vocals on Avantasia, Beyond the Bridge, Camelot, Luca Turilli's solo albums, Mob Rules, Rhapsody, Running Wild. I mean, he it goes on, but I'm
guessing these are all albums that were produced by Sasha. So I'm wondering if he's kind of like one of Sasha's, like one of his studio guys for backing vocals and stuff. Because that's interesting. I mean, you never really know who any of the backing but I've seen funny things where like you look at a guy's, page of credits, and it's like somebody that really well did like backing vocals during Stratovarius's recording of Babylon or something like that.
Right.
Jorn Land was there that day. I mean, like just like random things like that. It's interesting.
Yeah, and he came out with one other album. Ironically, the name of the band was called Red Key, not Red Key, but obviously there's the connection there. It was an album that came out in 2006. I believe it was called Rage of Fire. A little bit of a nondescript album. I actually own it, but I don't know. I think the Heaven's Gate material was better. That was kind of a one and done, although they're theoretically still active, but they haven't recorded anything in over 15 years. But yeah, it's funny that I think the main player here would be somebody who would gain fame and notoriety, but not for his guitar playing, but for his mastering and mixing and production work. Obviously a great songwriter, no question about it, but never really got the recognition, I guess, for this band. It was everything that came after it. But what you can say is this album sounds really good. And so obviously whatever gift he's been given for his ability to kind of lay down tracks, it started here. And for an older album, I think that sonically it's quite good and holds up well, despite it sounds a little dated because of the music, but not because of the production.
Agreed. I don't think I actually gave the production a second thought, which I think is a compliment in and of itself. Because typically an album that from 1991, especially a band's like second outing, might not be so great. And I never really even thought about it, which I think is, like I said, that's probably a good thing, just because it didn't serve as a distraction like it can at times.
Exactly. But yeah, let's get into it. Like I said, April 2nd, 1991, clocks in at just under 45 minutes, 10 tracks. Unlike some other albums at the time, no introduction. They go right into it full blast with the title track. And as I said, going back, this was probably my favorite track, hands down, 20 years ago. And then everything else was just kind of there. Different experience this time, but obviously the German power metal is really, really strong here. And I have to be honest, I hear some Pretty Maids in there as well. That early Pretty Maid sound, which obviously we're both, fans of. I think the vocals really stand out here. It's so catchy. There's the one thing I don't quite understand, and I'd love to hear your comments on this. There's this bridge that still confuses me on this song, because it's almost like a bluesy doo-wop thing going on, and then they go right back into the heavy metal. Despite that, fantastic track, and really just like a classic, I think, Heaven's Gate song. Just a really, really, really catchy tune.
Yeah, that bridge like that you mentioned especially kind of gave me Pretty Maids vibes. Something about it, it's just kind of like, nobody's doing this. So right. I like that they just were like, let's just throw this in there. It's cool. It's unique. So yeah, I mean, and it's cool because it's like the first track. They're just like, let's be experimental or whatever, like right from the get go. My first thought was that like the vocals reminded me of kind of like an Yngwie vocalist around this time. I don't know which, but like I feel like he would have fit right in Yngwie's band for one album before he would be unceremoniously released from his duties. But like I think he would have been a good fit for that. And I mean that positively, because Yngwie, until he decided to start singing himself, had some of the greatest, metal vocalists ever. So yeah, and then like it kind of, you get after that little bridge, you get your classic like dual power metal guitar thing that, Halloween had mastered just a few years prior. And yeah, great opening track. I mean, I think it just gets you, kind of gives you an idea of what to expect going forward. And I could kind of see why that was the one that stuck in your craw, I guess, when you first heard the album, because like, when it's your very first introduction to the band, it's kind of like, oh, this is what I feel like that's going to be the most memorable one for you. So, yeah, good stuff. Good start.
And it's really 2 for 2. The second track is called We Got the Time. There's a really, really catchy chorus on this song, and it's well put together. I am a big fan of this one, and it's one of these like galloping numbers, which I know we often talk about, but this is a really good 1-2 punch to start the album. There's one particular note just before the instrumental section that Retke hits, and for a guy who typically sings in a little bit of a lower register, he can go high, and he does it really well on this particular track. This is another really, really good song, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
I could just like picture this as like the kind of album a dragon would just hang out smoking a pipe would listen to.
I mean, it's very fitting, obviously.
Yeah, just ate a couple villagers, going to chill out now, have a pipe. again, this album cover with the slave like sweeping up the skull and the dragon's like top of his tower. This is such a great album cover, especially for somebody like me who loves RPGs and stuff. This is like straight.
This is why I bought the album, because I saw this cover. I'm like, I have to hear this. And again, at the time I had never even heard of them, let alone heard a note from them. But unfortunately for me, not every song is a hit on this thing. And of the 10, there's about 3 of them that I don't really care for, and the first of those is the Never Ending Fire, track number 3. I do not like this track. Before I kind of get into it, any thoughts on this one? Because to me, this is like a clear nod to Manowar.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's the first thing I thought of. That kind of deliberate mid-paced tempo. I don't think I disliked it as much as you did. I think it kind of, because we talk a lot about like the ongoing tempo of an album, and this is an album where I think it comes in waves. There's a ballad that towards the end. The first 2 songs were pretty fast, so this one kind of brings it back to kind of a mid-paced gate, if you will. It's probably, I don't know, it's the second longest song on the album. It's not my favorite. I think the chorus kind of has that like early 90s rock anthem kind of feel to it. But definitely Manowar-esque. I like the song. There weren't any songs I disliked. Definitely songs I liked more than others, but this is probably on the lower end, but I did still enjoy it.
The spoken word intro really just throws me off. Once that started, I was ready to skip to the next track because they never got me back after that. But it has this like slow, mid-paced anthemic march is like kind of the best way I would describe it. And if that's what they're going for, or if they were going for that nod to Manowar, they hit a home run. Unfortunately, it just doesn't really resonate with me. Whereas the next track, Empty Way to Nowhere, kind of picks up the pace a little bit, and this one I like. It's a kind of a simple song, and there's actually elements of that track that remind me of A Little Time by Halloween, ironically enough, which you spoke about earlier. This is a tune that I probably enjoy more than I should, but for some reason I think it's really catchy.
You're allowed. It's okay. I'm gonna let you
give me a pass.
Yeah, you're allowed. This is like another one that I thought, man, this would have. I feel like this would have been like a radio hit in like 1985 or 86 or something. It's just got that really catchy kind of faster paced tune, like sound to it, and it's got, again, like the chorus kind of has that kind of an anthemic kind of feel to it, like arena rock kind of thing. Another good faster paced song. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's like whenever bands talk about like rock or rocking or stuff, I find that it's a little bit cheesy.
Or metal. It's like when Gamma Ray starts doing Heavy Metal Universe, I cringe. Like, not a terrible song, but like the lyrics just take me out of the moment. So if it's about rocking,
again, speaking of Manowar, that was like Gamma Ray's ode to Manowar. I always felt
exactly.
Like.
Oh, 100%. No question about it. And for whatever reason, when the bands try to do that, it loses me. I'd rather just listen to Manowar at that point if I'm going to go that style, because they are definitely the masters of that, for better or for worse.
Yeah, leave the cheese to the masters of cheese, you know.
And they do it better than anyone. The fifth track, which is kind of like the end of side one, is an instrumental tune, a short little tune called Fredless, which I thought was interesting, and I was wondering where the name came up with, where they came up with Fredless. Apparently, and I didn't realize this, Thomas Retke's nickname in the band was Fred, and so they made an instrumental track, Fredless, which I thought was kind of cute when I put the pieces together. A good little tune, I have to say, and I completely forgot about this track. I don't even remember hearing this. It was like I was listening to it for the first time, but it's like a really cool way to end side one, and it really kind of just shows everybody's talent.
Yeah, just your run-of-the-mill, if you went to a power metal concert in 1991 and the singer went off to go smoke a cigarette or whatever it is singers do during these things. The drummer's drumming and the bassist is bassing and the guitarist is guitaring. And it's kind of a little bit of a showcase of what everybody in the band could do, and it gives the singer a little chance to rest the old voice box. But yeah, like this is just, pretty much what you would expect a 2-minute power metal instrumental to sound like. And I thought it was funny that you said that. I was going to say it would have been clever if the band singer's name was Fred, but sure enough, it was.
Close enough. Exactly. So it makes sense when you finally put the pieces together. Track 6, or side B of the album, starts with another kind of arena rock type tune called "Can't Stop Rockin'." You can imagine what the lyrics on this one are about. Again, it takes me out of a little bit with what's going on here, I guess. They pipe in the crowd noise. I mean, like this is the cheese is on full display here. And in many ways, it's another kind of nod to Manowar. I don't care for this track. I do enjoy it more than the Neverending Fire. I don't know that I would have started the second side of the album, especially with like a record. I don't know that I would have started it with this track. I think the next track, Flashes, actually probably would have been a better start to the album side. But I'll take your thoughts. I'm curious to see what you think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what band it's reminding me of with that like the backing vocals in the chorus that Can't Stop Rockin'. I don't know if it's like a Def Leppard or something in that era. Yeah. But again, I feel like it's like one of those, I could picture the music video in a abandoned warehouse with like a lot of fog and giant fans blowing all the long hair everywhere. Probably a song that probably comes off better live, if I had to guess. But again, it's a little bit Manowar-ish. But again, not bad. Like, I feel like I'm glad you mentioned the Neverending Fire, because I feel like I kind of lumped it in with that one, where it's kind of like they're two of the longer tracks on the album, and they're like kind of the same tempo and it kind of the same style, where it's trying to be like an arena anthem type of song. Like, I'm sure in their minds they're like, 20,000 people raising their fists in the air, screaming "Can't Stop Rockin'" at the same time, so that they don't have to play the backing track. They could just let the fans do the work. I'm sure that was the visual when the band was releasing the song. But I mean, it's fine. Like, I think 10 tracks of Livin' Hysteria style songs would have just made the album kind of boring. And this, I think, I like that there's different. You have a couple of these mid-tempo tracks. You have a 2-minute instrumental. You have a ballad. So I kind of liked that it was varied and not a kind of a one-note album.
And it's funny because even though there's obviously the nod to the German power metal, which was clearly an influence, this track in particular was very reminiscent of the hair bands, right? With just like, again, the big arena rock sound or what have you. You mentioned Def Leppard. I think that's like a very apt analogy or comparison. But there's something about this where it was almost like they were trying to kind of find their groove or their style, because they were borrowing things from a lot of different like genres of rock. So it was interesting. But to me, I think Flashes is a better track. It's shorter, but it's more upbeat. It's got some awesome bass lines. And this to me is like a real power metal anthem. It just has this awesome riff, and the drumming is kind of like holds everything together from having a train go off the tracks. I really like this. And it has a bass solo of all things, which is kind of cool. And one of the better guitar solos on the entire album. I like this track a lot.
Yeah. The chorus is awesome. The guitar, that fast guitar work reminds me a lot of like early Gamma Ray. And I have to say, like, I wonder how much German power metal is really an influence on this album, because I mean, how much German power metal is there in 1991? Like, you got Halloween and Blind Guardian and Gamma Ray, like literally just starting. I'd like to think that this might be actually more of an inspiration for other German power metal bands, because there's no Ed guy yet or anything like that. So I mean, it's interesting. Like, these guys are definitely like the forerunners of that era, or one of the forerunners, I should say. So, because I mean, nothing on here really screams like Halloween like ripoff or Gamma Ray ripoff or Blind Guardian ripoff. It's definitely like it's got its own style. A lot of, like you said, a lot of mixtures. There's Yngwie and Pretty Maids and Manowar, and God knows if any of those bands even influenced them. It just happened to sound that way because, you know, a lot of these bands were just kind of getting their start. I mean, even those older bands like Manowar and Yngwie and Pretty Maids have only been around for, you know, 8, 9, 10 years maybe at this point. So it's very interesting. When you listen to a band, you know, like Judicator, like last week where we were talking about a band, you know, an album that came out 7 years ago, there's so much more metal history to draw on as far as what could be the influence. Whereas this is just kind of like in kind of power metal's early days. So, you know, kind of a little bit of a tangent there, but yeah, I like this song. It's fast. It rocks. It's catchy, has a great, like just classic power metal kind of chorus. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny because neither one of us have talked about our tracks of the week yet. So I'm starting to wonder if we're venturing into the same area there. But before we get to the last 2 tracks on the album, this is the 8th track is Best Days of My Life, the ballad that you had mentioned earlier, with Miro on piano, you know, doing his guest spot. This is the band's true ballad. It's kind of simple. It's not nearly as good as the Conception ballads that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, but it definitely has its place on the album. It's kind of a bridge song, and by that I mean it's a good way to kind of mix up Flashes and the last 2 tracks, which are really heavy rockers or what have you. What do you think of the ballad?
It's good. I think it's interesting hearing Retke kind of do more of a lower register, whereas like a lot of the album up to this point's really like kind of higher notes, and so this is kind of like, you know, listen to my lower emotional voice.
A more soulful tune, if you will.
Yeah, I thought like the layered vocals in the chorus almost kind of had like a Queensryche vibe to them.
Nice.
Yeah, like I just maybe not Queensryche per se, but it reminded me of like the layered Jeff Tate vocals in Queensryche. Yeah, it was good. Longest track on the album, so maybe it didn't need to be that long at almost 6 minutes, but I could see it being kind of like their, I mean, granted, I'm no expert on their discography, but I could kind of see this being like their quintessential, you know, power ballad in concert or whatever. God, I don't even know if this band like toured or anything. I'm guessing they did, but yeah, it's good. I think it's also well placed because, like you said, I think the last 2 tracks on the album were probably my 2 favorite songs on the album. Which I always enjoy when a band saves the best for last, and we talk about track order all the time, and I think maybe other than Flashes and Can't Stop Rockin' maybe being flipped, I think the track order in general is really good on this album. But yeah, the last 2 songs really kick ass, and I think both of them stuck in my head at different points throughout the week.
Yes, I completely agree, and we are in complete agreement. Both of them could easily be my song of the week. These were the 2 tracks that popped the hardest for me. Going in with the preconceived notion that the title track was going to be my favorite, I walked away with these 2 like just kind of blowing everything else out of the water. And again, 3, maybe 2, 3, 4 tracks that I didn't love, maybe 5 or 6 tracks that I really enjoyed, but these two, We Want It All and Gate of Heaven, are really at the top of the heap. I guess we'll break them down. We'll do We Want It All first. This is just like a really fun guitar driven like tune. It has like a Doc and hair metal vibe to it, but not in the cheesy way that like the other tracks kind of had. This was like tastefully done. And the chorus has been stuck in my head all week long. I love this track, but it's not gonna be my track of the week. I'm gonna give it to Gate of Heaven, but I'm curious for your thoughts.
It's like the tasteful nudity of a Playboy magazine.
That's really well said.
The je ne sais quoi. Shout out to Brian. Yeah, another one of those songs that I feel like would have been a real great live track with the fans chanting, "We want it all!" Like just really just another like cool anthemic, catchy song, but I think better than the ones that preceded it on this album. But yeah, Gate of Heaven is my track of the week as well. So there you go.
Yeah, what a fantastic way to end this album. This is just a fast power metal tune. I almost hear, and this is obviously a band that would come later on, but I almost hear like Skylark at points of this track, and I have to wonder, they came out with a couple of albums. I think they were entitled like Gates of Heaven or something like that. I have to wonder if it was inspired by this track specifically. Fantastic vocals, has a bit of an Yngwie vibe in certain spots, and the bridge section is completely like Keeper 2 Halloween, which is fantastic. I'm sorry, not Keeper 2. I forgive me. I like it more of like Halloween. I hear like right through this, like Halloween from Keeper 1. Just a really, really awesome track. It's a meaty track, and by that, there's a lot going on here for a track that's under 5 minutes. They kind of go in all different directions, almost proggy in that sense, but just a fantastic closing tune, like one of the best.
One of the days this week, I was just finishing up listening to this album right before I went to go make dinner, and I was just cooking dinner, and I just had the chorus just repeating in my head, and I tried to get my HomePod to play it, and it didn't. I didn't recognize the album, and I didn't feel like going through hoops to play it. But every time I looked forward to it, every time I put the album on, and even this morning I woke up with it stuck in my head because it's just the whole song is just so catchy, start to finish. And I love when a song or an album just finishes with its strongest track. So it really just leaves you wanting more at the end, and that's what this song did. And there were certain parts in this album I just wanted to mention that reminded me a little bit of what Primal Fear would sound like at a certain point. It didn't pop into my head specifically at any point during our discussion, but I did want to bring that up as well, because that would be another German power metal band that would get started maybe 6-7 years after this. But yeah, I mean, just I just love the tempo and the speed of the song, like just all of it. It's just so vintage, early 90s power, like German power metal. Just really good stuff all around. Great track.
Yeah, totally. It's really, really, really enjoyable, and I'm glad you liked it, because I had a feeling when I selected it, I thought you might kind of like this a lot. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'll just say, scale of 1 to 10 for me, I'm going to give it a 7. Not the greatest album I've ever heard. There's some duds on here, and I kind of docked 1 point for each of the duds, but there's like 7, by and large, 7 really good tracks on this. Some better than others, but highly enjoyable for me. It's a solid 7. This is a good album.
Yeah, I rated it a bit higher. I thought it was like a 7.75 for me. Just shy of an 8. But I don't know. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those albums that I think is going to grow with me in time, even though it's already 31 years old. But I think that like
it'll
it's something
stay in
I'll
rotation.
go back to, and yeah, exactly. But I'll like go back to listening to it, and I think I'll start to develop the nostalgia that I didn't have for the first 31 years of its existence.
There you go. I like it, and I feel like it's been an eternity since you've selected an album for us to listen to. But before we get there, some news items, and we'll stay in Germany because Angel Dust, one of their founding members, unfortunately passed away earlier this week. His name was Frank Bankowski. He was their founding member and bass player. And, for not so much power metal, they were more of like a speedy and a thrashy band, and then kind of changed their sound when they got back together in the late 90s. But just wanted to announce the passing of Mr. Bankowski, who apparently this was put up on their Facebook page earlier this week that he had, passed, which was obviously sad news. And then some crazy news that I never, ever, ever thought I would say. Dream Theater has won a Grammy Award, which is still shocking to me. They had been nominated twice before, but they actually took home the Grammy for Best Metal Performance with The Alien. And quite frankly, it is deserved because, say what you will, and obviously we've joked about Labrie at times on this show and whatnot, but these guys are just such like stalwarts and such, the music is just so good and the studio stuff is so fantastic. It is nice to see them recognized for, say what you will about the Grammys. It was nice to see them recognized for, essentially for their lifetime achievement by winning this Grammy finally.
Yeah, it's almost like a gold watch. Just in the sense that they're probably going to go down as like the most well-known progressive metal band of all time. Maybe depending on if you lump Queensryche into that conversation or whatever. I mean, as far as like straight up progressive metal, Dream Theater is what I think people think of. And, it's interesting. I laughed because it was probably one of my least favorite songs on their newest album, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I enjoyed their new album a lot. I just thought that wasn't one of the stronger songs on the album, but I guess it wasn't a single, so that's probably why it was chosen.
That's what it was. Yeah, it's just funny because on a strong album, again, probably not my favorite track, but also the single, the first one that I heard, et cetera, and they've got the hardware now, so kudos to them and well deserved for many reasons.
Yep. Next stop, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 38 years from now. Maybe Iron Maiden will be in there by then.
That is the biggest travesty of them all. I could talk about that.
The Monkees aren't in there either, so
it's a joke. But yet you have aren't there like rappers in there now and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I love that Dolly Parton bowed out, she was nominated and she's like, I don't feel like I deserve to be in this. I'm like, man, there isn't anything not to like about Dolly Parton. She rocks.
She is a treasure. I love that.
Yeah. That makes her even more rock and roll that she said no.
Yeah, she basically told to hold the Hall of Fame, fuck off. It's wild. You can't make it up. But dying to know what I'm listening to next week. So lay it on me, brother. Yeah,
well, it's kind of in the same vein of my last choice, which was when we listened to all of Conception's discography because they're headlining Prog Power. Well, we're going to do the entire discography of the other band that's headlining Prog Power, Turilli Leone Rhapsody. They only have one album, so it should be pretty easy for you. But I wanted to listen to Zero Gravity, Rebirth, and Evolution, mostly because I didn't listen to it that much when it first came out. I'm looking at it, and I think I only maybe listened to the album start to finish one time, even though I listened to a handful of tracks a lot, like Phoenix Rising and DNA and Zero Gravity. And I just felt like I really kind of wanted to bone up on this album before seeing them headline at Prog Power, and I assume they're going to play a decent amount of tracks from this album. So,
yeah, it's funny. It's a great choice. When I think of that set and my anticipation for that set, obviously my mind goes to Symphony of Enchanted Lands and Legendary Tales and wanting to see a lot of that older material. I did not spend that much time with this album. I listened to it a number of times, but for some reason, I don't remember it that well. So it's definitely good to go back and certainly timely. So excellent choice. I look forward to it. I remember thinking it was good, but I don't remember. It didn't stay with me like those early Rhapsody albums. Let's just say that. So
I feel as if Luca, when he started Luca Turilli's Rhapsody, was moving away from the medieval kind of storytelling that was, that I think that Rhapsody of Fire is continuing with, but I think that he's kind of gone in more of a modern direction. And so I think that this, if you consider this the third Luca Turilli's Rhapsody album, just happens to have Fabio Leone on vocals rather than Alessandro Conti. I think it's definitely the most modern sounding, so I feel like it didn't grab me right away, but there were songs on it. I know there was one song, I forgot which, I think it was DNA with Elise from Amaranth doing guest vocals, which I thought was a great dichotomy with Fabio's vocals. So yeah, this was something that's kind of been on my mind as we get closer to Prog Power. I thought, it would be cool to spend some time talking about the two headliners for the Friday and Saturday night shows. And I don't know, maybe I'll pick a Stradivarius album too, but before June, just to hit those big three headliners. But I'm kind of natural segue here. Something that I had meant to mention last week, and that we posted on our social media. But speaking of Rhapsody, this great cover of Land of Immortals by Kristen Starkey, who's an opera-style vocalist. Her and guitarist Bradley Hall did this really, really cool cover of Rhapsody's Land of Immortals, which is like one of my all-time favorite songs. So to hear it in like this totally different style, I had to share it. So I kept forgetting to mention it, but since we were talking about Rhapsody anyway, I thought I would squeeze that in there. But
that was really well done.
I'm excited to see them. I can't remember if I've ever seen Luca and Fabio on stage together, honestly, because when the first time I saw Rhapsody of Fire, Luca was no longer in the band, and the first time I saw Luca Turilli's Rhapsody was when it was Luca Turilli's Rhapsody and Fabio hadn't joined yet. So that'll be really cool. I'm excited, and Rhapsody is just one of those bands that I've been saying, I think since we started going, like Rhapsody's going to headline Prog Power one day, right? And they did headline the Thursday night show with Luca Turilli's Rhapsody. So I guess this will really be the second Rhapsody headline set. And they got a tough act to follow because that was an insane set. I enjoyed that a lot. I was with you, and I know you enjoyed it a lot too.
Yeah, that was an epic set, and I felt like, if memory serves, I think that might have been like 2 or 2.5 hours. Like they were playing forever, or so it felt like. But it was one great song after the other. I really enjoyed that. So big shoes to fill, and a big act to follow. But looking forward to it. So excellent choice.
It's basically the same lineup, really, because that was Luca Turilli's Rhapsody's lineup then. Just
True.
Insert Fabio Leone, which is never a bad thing. So
good point.
Should be, yeah. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm kind of glad that we can kind of dig into this newest album a bit more than we did when it first came out.
I like it. Nice. Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks to everyone who's reached out. Keep the requests coming. We've got a list. We will get to them. I promise you. It just may take a little time, but we'll get there. And I look forward to discussing Rhapsody with you next week. So enjoy the week, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Take care.